So, what happens when the world shuts down and you're a travel blogger and suddenly there's no more travel? For me, it meant an unexpected pivot that reshaped my career in ways I never saw coming. Welcome back to my series where I walk you through the different chapters of my adult life, how I went from corporate tax attorney to digital nomad to travel blogger, and now franchise owner and consultant. This episode is a little different than the others. We're diving into sort of the second half of my digital nomad years, starting in the spring of 2020 when everything changed. When COVID hit, travel stopped, which meant my business, travel blogging, also stopped. At the time, we were living in Girona, Spain. Now, I did have a little bit of a benefit in that the couple years before COVID, I started to diversify our blogging income and our blogging content away from solely travel to other topics like recipes and things for the home. And I did this because I didn't anticipate a pandemic coming, but I did think a recession was coming. And if a recession came, travel would die, and as it would be a luxury that people couldn't afford. But if a recession did hit, then people would be spending more time in their homes and more time cooking. So I thought this was going to be a good way to insulate ourselves from a potential recession. And instead, we had a pandemic. So we didn't lose as much traffic at the start of COVID on our travel blog as a lot of our other travel blogging friends because I had started this diversification a year, 18 months before COVID even hit. But when COVID did hit and we were living in Spain, the restrictions there were some of the harshest in Europe. It hit Spain and Italy first before anywhere else. We weren't even allowed to go outside for walks, and we were living in a tiny, tiny little apartment with no outdoor space, and we went a little stir crazy. So I remember waking up, turning to Eric and saying, we need to move to Ireland. So in June of 2020, we packed up and landed in Limerick, where Eric's mom was from. We rented a big house with a backyard, something we definitely didn't have in Spain. And it felt like such a luxury to have that space, especially when in Ireland, we ended up in really strict lockdown too. The pubs were closed for over 400 days straight. So life was far from normal. We weren't allowed at some points to go more than 5 kilometers or a couple of miles from our home. So, as much as life wasn't normal, we had a large enough space that at least gave us some breathing room that we didn't have when we were living in Spain. But while the world felt like it was standing still, my work started to move into a new direction. I started when I found a part time role for 15 hours a week on Upwork as a website editor. And that quickly grew into a full time position. And before long, I was scaling a content marketing company in, of all things, the legal online gambling space. What started as editing blog posts turned into running operations, managing people, and preparing the company for acquisition. And we did that successfully. The founder sold the business, and I stayed on with the acquiring company for another 18 months, eventually serving as head of operations. The wild part is that while I was stepping into these increasingly senior roles, I was still traveling. Once restrictions lifted a bit, we explored Ireland, places like Donegal in the north, and tiny coastal towns that I've never visited before. We had a local pub in Dublin that we loved, even though we lived on the other side of the country. We were able to use our travel blog, Food and Drink Destinations, to be able to explore a lot of these destinations in a way that we weren't before. We met chefs, we went to distilleries, and we were still able to write and live that travel blogging lifestyle while also was increasingly spending time in a more traditional corporate role. Eventually, we made it back into traveling through the rest of Europe again. But behind the scenes, though, I was managing a team that went from a handful of writers to 25 full time employees and another 25 or 30 independent contractors. I was running a division of this business that generated millions of dollars of revenue a year. It struck me so many times. I'd be sitting in a cafe in Ireland or later in Portugal or Italy, leading an all hands meeting for essentially a global team. It wasn't the digital nomad lifestyle I imagined back when I started blogging, but it was proof that the skills I built over years, skills from my blogging days as well as my lawyer days, SEO, content strategy, leadership, they translated into something bigger and more lucrative. By the spring of 2023, I was ready for the next leap. That's when I joined the Milk Road, a fast paced crypto newsletter, as their COO. Again, I pulled together everything from my past lives: law, blogging, scaling digital businesses, operations, and channeled it into a space that was moving at lightning speed. And through it all, Ireland was still home base. I was still traveling, still exploring the world, but now with an entirely new career path unfolding in front of me. The thing is, crypto did not mix with me. I understood the legal online gambling space and was able to build up that knowledge, but crypto never clicked. In the end, it was in part that role at the Milk Road that brought us back to the US. And we came back for two reasons that I'll explore in a later episode. But throughout all that time, throughout those first 3 years of the start of COVID, I built myself a new career that enabled me to continue to travel, to continue to work remotely, and to continue to build skills and live life in a different way on my own terms. Now, this chapter of my life wasn't about travel in the traditional sense. It was about reinvention, about adapting when everything I'd built suddenly disappeared and finding out that I had the skills to build something entirely new and different. In the next episode, I'll talk about how those experiences led me directly into entrepreneurship again, this time as a home services franchise owner and consultant. So stick around, subscribe, because the story is just getting good.